Hello, and welcome to that Eurovision podcast, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. My name is Rory, and I'm doing pretty well today. I've just come back from a walk, as per usual, with these podcasts, except I am absolutely drenched because on the way it completely rained down, and now I am just trying to keep myself warm. And I think by dealing with this country, we might be able to get warm very, very quickly. And yeah, so joining me.
Jazzy, very excited to talk about the topic that we're talking about today. And the weather's been a bit different here. It's been quite warm, quite muggy. I wouldn't say it's pleasant outside, but it's not raining, I guess. There's that.
Anything's better than not raining.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Rosie. I have just finished work for the day, so I am very, very happy to use my downtime to be able to talk about the country that we're going to be talking about today.
Tim here, same with Rosie. I just finished work, and I am so happy to be using my downtime and not think about work.
Don't
And
wanna
obviously-
work. Don't want to make money.
I don't want to make money while I sleep.
But
But to be fair, though, what we're talking about is going to make me miss, well, the topic that we're going to talk about, because it's very close to my heart. So I'll let Rory take it away and explain.
well, I mean, it's only fair because we're actually going to be talking about Tim's stan country, the one and only Israel. Woo! Yeah. So yes, Israel's been participating since the 1970s, 1973, and Israel has actually managed to win the competition 4 times in 1978, 1979, 1998, and most recently in 2018 with Netta and Toy. Now, obviously, Israel's whole presence in the contest is somewhat disputed because, is it a European country or is it not a European country? However, what we're going to do is we're just going to completely just cut out that whole idea because Israel is seen to be more culturally linked with Europe than it would be more with Asia. So that's the reason why Israel gets to take part in Eurovision, and a country like, say, Iraq or Iran can't. So that's that. So just to sort of get things started, who would be your sort of favorite Israeli entries throughout the years?
I've got quite a few.
Okay.
I'd definitely say the one that sticks in my mind would be Hallelujah, 1979, which they won with. I just think that's like a really nice song, and it like when I hear it at Eurovision events, it's a song where it kind of like brings everyone together, and I really like that. Also, there was some ESC radio listening parties during the lockdown, and I don't know, they played this song like every single week, and it just had that like sentimental, emotional value to it, and I just think it's such a good winner. It's definitely one of my favourite winners of all time. So, yeah, I'd definitely say that is probably one of my favourite Israeli entries. And then going into like more recent, I'd say out of all of them from the last decade, I'd probably go for Golden Boy. Nadav Godeji in 2015 is probably my favourite because it's just such a bop. It's so fun, and it's a song that I really enjoy listening to now. And it's a song that kind of like brought Israel back from a couple of years of quite bad results. And then obviously they came back and they got a top 10 with Golden Boy. And it's kind of been on the up from there. So they've obviously had a win since with Netta and Toy. So yeah, I just feel like Golden Boy was like the start of a new era for Israel in terms of results and songs that they've been sending at Eurovision.
I think some of the songs that they've done in the last sort of 5 years or so have been really, really good. I love Golden Boy. Made of Stars as well, I really, really enjoy, aside from the fact that when I think about it, I start trying to mash it together in my head with The Best in Me. Because
no.
we are the best in me. And that just happens in my head.
The Best in Me is such a guilty pleasure, though.
Maybe if you mix it up with Made of Stars, though, on its own, who knows?
in the 2018 episode, I think, I've spoken about how much I really like Toy as a song, and also Feka Libi. The 2020 entry, I think, is really fascinating from a musical and linguistic perspective. But the one that I would actually go for as my favourite entry, not necessarily opposite to Jazzy, because they're kind of a nice companion, but Abani B. So their first win from 1978. And it was one of those songs that was always sort of on the fringe of my consciousness generally. I sort of knew it and it was always quite fun and that sort of thing. But then when they used it as the postcard music for the 2019 contest, I completely fell in love with it. And the fact that I have that connection is just absolutely lovely, because I think about how great the song is, but also just how much I love the 2019 contest.
Aww. It's taking it proper throwback to, well, at the time of recording last year anyway, but take us back.
Okay, I'm gonna go on because
It's Tim time.
This is my stan country. Well, for me, I mean, I've loved most of Israel's entry. I mean, you've got the quirkiness of, when was it, in 2012 with Time? Was it Time?
Yeah.
I've actually forgotten about it. And I was just like, okay, this is why we need Israel, because they sometimes send quirky entries. But then you've also got the entries where they've stood up for rights, kind of like when they won in 1998 with Dana International. And I really love the fact that Israel was able to be at the forefront of that at the contest at the time. Another thing I'd like to say is I like the fact that they stayed true to the Hebrew language as much as they could. Taking an example would be 2014, that you don't necessarily have to stick to one. You can still have English in your song and still have an amazing pop banger. Just a shame about the result, which really broke my heart, because Same Heart was in my top 5. And also, I like the fact that they're always fresh and innovative since 2015. I mean, they won with Toy, but another level would be when they picked Feka Libi for Eden. And that was just amazing in its own right, because of the fact that she meshes a lot of languages and still able to make it sound fresh.
It's sort of exactly what Lost and Found was trying to be.
Except better.
Oh,
And I like Lost and Found.
Same!
That sort of combination of musical styles and genres.
It was my winner until the first rehearsal. Ouch.
It's okay, because it paved the way for Netta to win. So, you know, like,
Yes.
I think it's only fair that Lost and Found, like, had to suffer so that Netta could win. If Lost and Found was good, I don't think Europa could have coped with it.
Lost and Found walked so Feka Libi can run.
That's it. Yeah, for me, a lot of the time I don't necessarily enjoy a lot of Israel's songs, just because like it doesn't really sort of resonate with me in the same way that sort of other countries' songs would. But that being said, I do actually really like a lot of songs, not only from like the modern era, but also from sort of the previous years as well. So as for sure, I really do love Abedni B as well, because I don't know if any of you have seen it, but if you haven't seen it, I will include it in the article, the relevant article to this podcast. But essentially, someone has done a misheard lyrics version of Abini B, and it's "I wanna be a polar bear without a bra." And anytime I watch it, anytime I ever listen to Abani B, I can't even hear the normal lyrics without thinking of "I wanna be a polar bear." But yeah, and then as well, I really do like "Hi." That's a very kind of big favorite as well, from 1983, which is Afra Haza. And then, of course, you have to mention Khan from 1991, because that's quite possibly one of the most famous sort of Eurovision songs, even in Israel. So, like, that in itself is very good. Although I have to say, I do like a lot of modern era songs from Eurovision, from Israel. And, for example, like, I really do like Same Heart. And I think it was very sad that she was done so dirty, because even then her actual selection songs, like the three potential selection songs that May Feingold had, were amazing, and I thought that was amazing as well. But I do really appreciate the sort of seriousness they sort of take with it. So, for example, we have 2008, The Fire in Your Eyes, which is Boaz, followed that by Noah and Mira, which was There Must Be Another Way. So it was it really sort of brought a whole new level of musical profoundness, sort of, and being pioneers and stuff. Although saying that, my favorite entry from Israel, and I know people will think that this is a piss take, but I'm afraid it has to be, be happy.
Oh god.
2000 ping pongs. I just think it's absolutely hilarious. And also, in case you didn't actually realize, that was the first time that we actually had a gay kiss ever on the Eurovision stage. So that in itself is showing, progression, especially in the wake of Dan International as well. So yeah, there's a lot of good songs in there, but for me, they only sort of come few and far between. Yeah, so as Tim had actually said, Israel is very sort of proud in its sort of language and linguistic heritage, of course, by sort of including Hebrew in a lot of the songs that have actually been taking part in the contest. However, in the past few years, we've actually been able to see a sort of linguistic diversity. For example, in 2007, we had French for the first time, which is Push the Button, if we remember that song. And then,
how can we not remember that song?
I mean, what was that song? Let's be real. And then in 2009, we had English, Hebrew, and Arabic for the first time, which in itself was an incredibly symbolic measure. And then, as well as that, we had 2020, when we had Amharic for the first time that we had the national language of Ethiopia in it. So why do you think that sort of Israel is so needing to include all of these different languages? Do you think it's just for the sake of inclusion, or do you think there's a lot more at hand to it?
I feel like Israel, every single year they try and do something different with their entries. Like in most cases, no two entries are the same, and I feel like that is definitely part of the reason, because we have seen, I think we rarely see an African language in Eurovision. I think we've only seen it once before with Swahili in 2011 with Norway, and I think that Haba Haba.
Yeah.
While it didn't qualify, it felt really nice to see a new culture be introduced into Eurovision, and I really like that Israel opted for this for Feka Labi in the national final in 2020, because they want to show off not just Eden as an Israeli artist, but Eden as so I think it's Ethiopia.
Yeah, Ethiopian.
Yeah, Ethiopian, and just show off her culture as well as the Israeli culture. They want the artists to be proud of who they are, and I really, really like that.
I think for me, it's more of the fact that of course, the purpose of the Eurovision Song Contest is to show the world your culture. And I think with the inclusivity of Hebrew, that's kind of what they're doing. And they're being creative with it, because being the contest, you have to make sure that your entry is memorable. And that's what they have successfully done, especially since they turned it around in 2015, and especially now when they've included the Hebrew language once again. And she's done it so well, it was just a shame that we wouldn't know how it would have done. And hopefully she does the same again in 2021.
Fingers crossed, because I think it's only fair, because she's honoring her sort of heritage, but then she's also including those sorts of styles musically into that performance. And I don't think we've ever really heard something like that before, with the exception of Haba Haba, but that we'll save that for the Norway episode, which will be coming up soon.
I really enjoy the way that they sort of play with language, and I feel again that it comes down to the artist's choice, really. the languages that they use are ones that feel right for the artists. So Mira of Noah and Mira is Arabic, speaks Arabic, so it makes sense to have Arabic in that song. Eden it makes sense for her to have Amharic in that song. And it very much feels like an art sort of initiative. And at the same time, they're able to fuse all these different cultures together. And I feel like Israel as a country is such a fusion of different cultures that it allows all of those different things to come through.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of it is definitely I think part of it is definitely in the music side of things, because obviously being in the Middle East, you're kind of in the melting pot of so many different cultures and civilizations and stuff, and that in itself gets reflected in like the music. So for example, look at like Nadav Gej with Golden Boy. Like you had like the Western influences with the kind of pop, but then you also had the, I don't know how you kind of say it, like the kind of Middle Eastern sort of flair in it with the drums and the I don't know what you call that, but but then as well, like you also have like that in it. That whole thing kind of comes out in itself in Netta's performance, and it comes out in Imri's performance as well. Because, for example, with Imri, that's quite possibly the most sort of Middle Eastern sort of meets Western culture in Eurovision. I think that's like the best sort of mesh. Now, it's a shame, obviously, that it didn't necessarily work out as well as it did, but yeah, I like the way that they include lots of different languages, because I think it's definitely sort of showing off the national culture, but also, being memorable. And I think it's really, really interesting that in 2009 and in 2020 they've included lyrics in Arabic, and I think obviously due to the situation, I guess you could say, in Israel, to put it lightly, that in itself is a very symbolic gesture, and I think for that to be included in a contest where it's going to be seen by 200 million people, I think it's showing that Israel wants to be seen as a land of inclusivity and cohabitation, really,
Do you feel like it's very much a sort of deliberate strategy, or if it is more sort of reflective of the genuine way that Israel's music scene works?
What, that they include Arabic?
That they want to put forward this image of inclusivity generally, given like you mentioned the current situation. Do you feel like that the way they present themselves is a deliberate attempt to counter the way that they might be perceived, or do you feel like it's just sort of a coincidence?
That's a very interesting question. I possibly could see it as a sense of a marketing ploy, but at the same time, it's so symbolic you wouldn't almost want to think of it as being a marketing ploy. I do think there has to be some sort of give and take, especially in the Israeli music scene, when you have so many different sort of cultures and languages and stuff sort of blending together. It probably is quite likely that you'd hear sort of English, Arabic, or other kind of languages around there, or French, for example. It's possible that you could hear those sorts of languages in Israeli music, and then it really kind of comes down to what your own perception of both Israeli music and Israel as a country comes down to, and the way that it all comes together, because obviously music is supposed to be receptive by its citizens. So yeah, so I know I'm talking too much. If Jazzy or Tim have any other opinions, please do get involved.
No, I actually like what you're saying, and actually kind of agree. So
you brought a lot to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tough question, because obviously we aren't Israeli, so we can't really tell whether or not this is somewhat representative of what the Israeli music scene is like. But it is possible. I could see it being possible that they wouldn't sort of have this as a way to sort of show off their tolerance of sort of a multitude of different things. For example, as well, we know Israel is one of the most pro-LGBT countries in the entire Middle East, and we know that through sort of Tel Aviv gay pride and things like that. So
yet part of the reason why that is because of a marketing ploy to be able to make the country seem more appealing and more diverse. That is a very deliberate strategy that they put forward, which is sort of where my question came from in the first place. And we've seen it with other countries in the contest as well. So Russia putting forward love, love, peace, peace songs like A Million Voices. We've seen countries make a very deliberate effort to portray themselves in a particular way, either through the artist or through the song or how they present themselves. And yeah, just sort of curious as to whether people thought Israel was doing that, or if it is just sort of genuinely them representing themselves and the artists in this way.
I'm going to say something that might be really unpopular, but I'm going to say it. Israel seem a lot more genuine than a country like Russia does. Like, Russia, it really does feel very, very performative. I feel like Israel just wants to do their own thing, and I think you see that with how, like, diverse their entries are year on year. But, like, with Russia, like, you had these, like, peace songs, like, I think between 2013 and 2015, and then you've had, like, the whole Pushing Sergei and, like, the whole Dream Team. I just feel like it's not the same. I feel like Israel just wants to show off something different every single year when it comes to Eurovision, while with Russia I do feel it's quite performative.
I think as well, Israel has a tendency, they know when they're sort of making a joke. They know when they're making a joke, and I think that's when you know that you can't take them seriously. So, for example, you know, Ping Pong in 2000, 2007, the T-Packs. Now, obviously, that was very much based on escalation in politics and tensions between sort of the US and the Middle East, and then obviously there was a whole bunch of things like that. But the fact that they were able to sort of make a joke out of that and then send that into the contest, I think they have balls, and I think, you know, they're willing to take risks in ways that many other countries wouldn't. But I think, imagine if you got a country like Ukraine sending a song like Push the Button. You couldn't see any other country other than Israel sort of send that song. So maybe... Sorry, go on.
I feel like when Israel does send songs that are performative, it's like they're taking, like, almost taking the mickey out of their own government, because I know that a lot of the Israelis do not, from what I've read, do not actually support their own government, and they do not support what's going on. It's basically what the government are doing, and I guess through their songs that's the only way they can really show that, with songs like Push the Button. And also, like, I think in 2009 where they had like the Arabic performer and the Israeli performer, and they had both the languages included. I feel like Israel really does want to like show off that a lot of the people of Israel do want that inclusivity. They do want to be shown as being united. However, there's obviously issues with the government in that country. They want to show that like not all Israeli people agree with what's going on with the Middle East, and I think that's a really good thing. What I'm trying to say is that it feels a lot more genuine than Russia does, with wanting to promote the inclusivity. I feel like with Russia it's quite performative, and they just want to look good to do better, but they don't really want the change that comes along with it. Whereas I feel like Israel and Israeli people do want that change, and that's why they've sent songs in the past that could be taken as taking the mickey out of their government, whereas I don't think Russia would ever do that.
Imagine if they
did.
No,
Georgia does that for Russia.
Yeah, because they did not want to Putin.
They did not.
That in itself was a complete tune, and if that did go to Moscow, that would have been my number one. Plus, as well, that's where we got to see Taco Gotcha Chiladza for the first time. So, you know, we have to stand.
Like, not pretending like I'm a political expert or anything. I feel like I need to put a disclaimer with that one because
all right.
obviously I'm not a political expert. It's just my opinion, and you can feel free to disagree with my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, disclaimer, I'm not pretending I know everything.
Yeah, of
And
course.
quite honestly, the whole situation is so complex. I've been trying to explain politics in Israel to my students, and you start getting into something and it just becomes this whole tangled web of stuff that gets really difficult to unravel.
So this one tried to like convince this one that this was okay, and then that was a complete mess. And it was like
basically it's all colonialism's fault.
Actually, this whole thing just blamed the UK, okay, guys? Just blame the UK.
Blame the UK.
For everything.
It's all Brexit's fault. Blame Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear. But just kind of lightening things up a little bit. Okay, so in the past couple of years, we've actually seen a kind of change of tack from Israel, and that comes in part from the shutting down of Israel's original public broadcaster, the IBA, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority. And it's kind of the most well-known thing because during the Israeli spokesperson, Ofer Nachson's delivery of the vote in 2017, that's when he said, after Eurovision, our channel will shut down. And that in itself, I think, I don't know if you guys...
It was a really emotional moment.
Yeah, you kind of didn't know what to feel. You were like, what? I don't like this.
I was like, did Israel just announce their withdrawal from 2018 live on air? But obviously we know.
That's taking some balls. But, yeah. But, so since IBA has shut down, we've had Cannes come in, which is the completely new sort of style and a completely new approach to Eurovision. And it's worked out pretty well because we've, on their first go of being a participating broadcaster, they managed to win. And then they managed to host it in 2019 and putting on a fantastic show. And then obviously we've had Feke Libi, which had a very positive sort of reaction from not only from the fandom but also people who necessarily wouldn't have heard the song for the first time. So do we think that Cannes is just trying to like become the new sort of powerhouse now that the age of Sweden is starting to somewhat die out a little bit? Controversial statement, I know, but
oh, I definitely agree with the Sweden dying out comment. Their televote results say it all. I think they really do want to be a powerhouse. I do think they want to like regain some of that like glory that they had like maybe in the 70s, and also I think they did quite well in the 90s as well. I just think they want to be more prominent in Eurovision because I feel like in the last few years that they were with IBA, they were there and like they were making the final consistently after 2015, but they weren't necessarily getting good results in the final. Like they were coming like mid-table to the bottom, and you didn't really like. You knew they were there, but they weren't like massive like forces to be reckoned with in Eurovision. But obviously, since Cannes have taken part, I feel like both performances they've sent, even though Home did not do as well as personally I think it should have done. I think he performed it well. I think the staging was good. I think it should have done better than it did. That is a controversial opinion, I guess. But my personal opinion is Home should have done better than what it did. I just think they've got it right both years, in my opinion, that Cannes have been in charge. And I feel like with Feke Libi, I feel like they would have staged it really well, and I feel like they would have got another good result because, again, something in Amharic is very, very different to anything we've really seen in Eurovision before, and I feel like Europe is now more open to stuff like that maybe than they were in 2011, where I feel like in 2011 there was still a lot of like joke entries and stuff like that would push through over something like Habba Habba. Also, the difference with Feke Libi, I feel like it was more mainstream and more accessible maybe than Habba Habba was. And I do think it would have brought them quite a decent result. And yeah, I think Can just want to regain some of that former glory in Eurovision that they haven't had. And who knows? I'm really excited for the future for Israel.
I find it quite interesting. It's sort of going back to an earlier point, really, but the two songs in somewhat recent years where they've had sort of the least success, so I Feel Alive and Home, are the ones that have probably the most conventionalness to them and the most conventionally Western aspects to them. I Feel Alive is a very sort of regular pop song, and Home is a very sort of traditional musical theatre number, and I like both of them, and they're both very good at what they do, but they don't have that extra sort of identity the way that Fekelebi or Toy or Made of Stars or Golden Boy had in the same way. And I think it's really interesting seeing quite how dramatic the split in results is with both of those.
Like in 2017 and 2019, the juries just really didn't like either performance, although they did a little bit better in the televote. I think both of them did a little bit better in the televote. It really shows that the juries are not looking for something that's just conventional and typical. You have to stand out. And obviously, in their genres, I guess this isn't the case. Because again, I do feel like I Feel Alive and Home could have came from another country, like any other, not any other country, but could have came from another country, and they still sound very similar. Whereas a lot of like songs like Toy, even Golden Boy, I don't think could have came from another country.
And I'd have been very surprised if someone else did Golden Boy and they were still telling you that they were going to show you Tel Aviv, even if they came from like Azerbaijan or something.
Yeah.
So next best thing is the closest thing we're going to get to Let Me Back in Baku or something like that. We'll do something like that.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Why do we have to go back to Baku?
Oh, that's good.
Wow, I made a Star Wars reference.
I'm going to steal that when Azerbaijan next win.
Well, I mean, hi guys, Nachavan 2022. Woo!
Okay, well, the thing is, though, with IBA, before, they were really successful, obviously, when they started, because there weren't that many countries there. But obviously, as time went on, I think Israel has somehow lost its way. But then again, in the final 2 years, they were found.
They were lost and found. But
yeah, that was so cheesy. But looking at it, Can had a lot of pressure on them since they took over the duties. Obviously, on their first participation as Can, they won the contest. So that's a bit, and they had to host it. And looking at the last 3 participations they've had as Can, I think they've done quite a good job, despite of how much has been thrown at them. Like, win, now you gotta host, and then now you gotta
try and win again.
So, I mean, so far, Can has done a good job, and and despite the IBA, I keep forgetting. Despite IBA closing, I mean, I like that they ended it on a good note, where at least they qualified for the grand final.
Yeah,
give them that. That's all I'd say. But good job on it, Israel, and I really hope that your recent success continues on, even if it's just qualifying for the grand final. That's, for most countries, that's all you can ask for.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because obviously, before the introduction of semi-finals, like, Israel was very consistent, regularly getting sort of top 10, almost top 5 results. And then after the introduction of the semi-finals, things started to the wheels started to come off, shall I say. And, we got to that point where we literally had no Israel in it for, 4 years. And I think at that point they sort of realized something had to be done. Because obviously, if you're sending big stars like May Feingold, Moran Mazur, and Dana International, like the most recent winner at the time for Israel, and they haven't qualified, it was definitely needing a shake-up. Now, obviously, people can decide whether or not they like Home. Home was my last place of 2019, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Um, but I think Can has like managed to take the reins from IBA quite well, and I think they've managed to handle, you know, Israel's participation pretty well because they build up the hype. They have the, well, at the time, Hakachov Haba, butchered that Hebrew pronunciation. I'm very sorry. But I think they had this sort of selection process up until 2020 that it was going to produce a good star with a viable song and one that had commercial viability for that and longevity that would last well past the contest. And they definitely scored well with that with Netta. Kobe, debatable. I do think if the contest had gone ahead, I do think we would have seen a good result for Ida and Elena because, as well, we've talked about much before. Fekalabi had that sort of party vibe, but is also sort of happy, and that's kind of something that you want to have, and it's something that you want to see. So I think Cannes has done really well in sort of building the hype up for its entries and stuff, and I do hope that in the future, Israel continues with this sort of trend that they're going on in the sense of happy songs with a Middle Eastern flair. Maybe have a ballad every now and again because everyone loves Shiri Maimon. Me, not necessarily as much. Don't hate me. But I do hope that there's a lot that sort of there's a lot going for Israel, I think, now that Khan isn't in holding the reins, But yeah, so just sort of starting to sort of finish things up a bit. What do you think the future does hold for Israel?
If they're being consistent, I wouldn't be surprised if they suddenly win again and haven't had a doubt of whether or not they're going to host again.
Oh, no.
But looking at it, if they do host, I would love to go back to Israel because of the fact I went there for the 2019 contest. They were really hospitable, and I barely scratched the surface of touring it, and it would be fun to go back again. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I feel like there's a lot of top tens in their future, and if they carry on like on the same trajectory of like sending something different, sending something that people enjoy, I wouldn't be surprised if they won soon as well. But yeah, I definitely feel like some top 10, top 5 results are definitely in their future, and that's a good thing.
I feel like I was kind of going along pretty much exactly the same lines, and I feel like the way for them to be successful is to keep doing what they're doing in terms of fusing their very unique sort of cultural aspects of things. Like, I love hearing things sung in Hebrew. I love those sorts of traditional Jewish instruments, that sort of thing. And I think that's really fantastic to hear alongside something that does sound a little bit more modern, and they've been really, really good at doing that over the last few years. So if they can keep doing that, then that's going to be a good trajectory for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think like if they're carrying on along the same line as what with like Netta and Eden Elena, I think they have a lot of good top tens available, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if we did go to Israel at some point again. Whether or not it happens very soon, who knows? Because obviously, given the current situation and that we had mentioned earlier, we don't want to be, having Israel win and then have another big kerfuffle as to which city should host it because of things that happen outside of the contest. But I do think that musically there's a lot of potential in Israel, and I think, if they're carrying on with this sort of process of blending, Middle Eastern flares with Western pop, then I think, the future does look bright for them. And I do hope that, at least on a personal level, that I get to enjoy a bit more of the Israeli entries because sometimes, who knows? But, yeah, so do we have any sort of final points on Israel? Okay.
All I can say is keep with your new selection. I hope you're able to continue on and consistent.
Oh yes, because we have a new selection process now from post 2020, so that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm just really excited to see what Eden sends next year.
Yeah. I'm very glad they're sending her again.
Yeah. I think it was only fair, especially because like she was like the most sort of popular person to come on to Hakochav Kaba. Yeah. So yeah, that sort of takes us to the end of this episode of that Eurovision podcast. Hopefully we've managed to come out of this somewhat unscathed, obviously because we're dealing with a somewhat controversial country in the contest. But if we haven't, please do let us know if we need some education or something like that. I'm sure we'll get the history books out for sure. So I would love to say to the haba to Jazzy, Rosie, and Tim for coming to talk about this fantastic country and all of its lovely songs in the contest. In the next couple of episodes, we'll be sort of continuing on with these sort of country episodes and maybe having a couple of other year retrospectives as well along the way. And yeah, so in the meantime, please do continue to follow us on all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at That Euro Podcast. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well, so make sure you follow us there so that you always get notified for whenever a new episode comes out. And yeah, so shall we all say... I'd say goodbye in Hebrew, but I don't know what it is, so we'll just say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye!
Bye.